Hey everybody, I'm Cloudjumper, and this is the breakdown of my track for Bad Snacks Beat Battle number 10. Just like last time, I wanted to give you a quick overview of how I created this track, but before that, let me just play it for you and then I'll walk you through all the different parts. Yeah, so that's the track. I hope you enjoyed that. I know it's a little bit loud, but I kind of felt like that this time around. So the story behind this track is a little bit I slept on the deadline for the beat battle a tiny bit. I thought it was a week later, and then I basically just threw this together in a day, maybe a day and a half or something, in which I had like only a couple of hours on those 2 days to work on it. So I did cheat a little bit, I have to admit upfront. The rules were to only use the samples that Dave provided, and samples were great, by the way, really fun. Thank you, Dave. And there was a MIDI file in there. And so I really capitalized on that MIDI file that was in there, which I think is just the MIDI of the sample here in the beginning, the Corderino, which I guess it would have been possible to just extract that MIDI information from that, but he included it in the stems. And so other than that, the rules were that we were only allowed to use up to 3 external instruments or sound sources. And so I kind of stretched that a little bit because really there's just one external instrument that I'm using, which is Novo by Heaviosity. And almost all of the track is made through that and then manipulating whatever sounds Novo creates. And on top of that, I used 2 different percussion loops, and that's about it. So technically, I am using only 3 external sound sources, but I'm using Novo, which is like a whole contact instrument with several different, I guess, presets and settings and so on. So it's a little bit cheated, but it's all right. I think the point of it is for me mostly the fun and the practice. So yeah, that's what I did. And here is kind of how I went about it. So let's just start with the intro and I'll like walk you through it. I started with this Corderino sample, which I didn't do a whole lot with. All I did is I stretched it a lot, and then I also changed the warp mode to texture. I cut it off here, and I made this kind of riser out of it. And yeah, then it sounds like this. And then there's a little bit of low pass filter on it. And what's going on underneath that is what I mentioned before. This is the MIDI part, which I chopped up a little bit, not the whole MIDI file that he included. And that is playing here on Novo. And that's what basically what makes this intro work, or what also keeps kind of the tone or sets the tone up for the beginning. Novo itself is technically a string instrument, but it works kind of like a string designer. So you can see that as I play this, there is a bunch of things kind of being manipulated as this sound progresses. There's a lot of automation in here, which I'm not going to go completely into. And other than that, all I did to it is I had a decapitator on top, filter through the whole thing, curve here. There's filter sweep at the end. That's the only reason the filter and the resonance are working at all. And then there's a little bit of utility here just to give that a little movement in space and to center. So here is what that sounds like. And I'll just play it without the decapitator for a second here. And then you can see as we move on, the filter opens here a little bit, the EQ curve slightly changes, space gate and drive are also like moving along, and you can see all of them. So with decapitator, it sounds like this. You can see how it immediately got fuller. Yeah, and then there's just this little filter sweepy thing at the end, which is really nothing else but this filter cranking up the resonance like crazy, doing a little sort of saw wavy pattern here, which is then followed by the next piece, which just these little filter effects. And all they do is this little sweep. That's it basically. That's all this whole group is there for. And then we're coming to the more interesting part, I guess. So I wanted to really have something that kind of hits there, but originally I wanted something very sort of IDM, Aphex Twin, Venetian snares kind of. Went into a different direction in the end, but yeah, that's how I started out. And so let's have a look at the drums. There was, I think, 2 drum samples that it came with, and I honestly haven't saved all the processing I did in between. I did a whole lot of stuff to them. I chopped them and ran them through so much stuff, but like my CPU couldn't handle having all that open. So eventually I bounced it down, and that's what I'm going to show you. I bounced it down to this kind of drum loop. And so all I have on there right now afterwards is a little utility, a tiny bit of high pass, and a neutrino. And that's basically what I started out with in terms of drums. I chopped these a couple of times in different sections and moved them around to the point that I don't remember anymore all the things that I've done. On top of those drums is this clap, which just kind of brings an extra layer of rhythm to it. And the drums, the main drums, also go into a send that gives them a squeeze here, just a little bit of drum processing, a little bit of drum bus. And so this is the heads on top. These are gated, and all the drums also are going into several layers of stutter edit. I think the main drums don't, but the heads here do, and the clap does. So that's the sort of glitchy stuff that you hear on top. And so then drums together with the heads will be sounding like this. And then because that wasn't enough yet, I needed some extra heads. And so this is like this clap loop, and the heads are where I used a bunch of like loops and samples and chopped them and manipulated them in different ways. Then what came together is this little combo. Mind that you will hear some of the glitches coming from stutter edit, and some of them are coming from stuff I did to the sample and then bounced it. Yeah, and so on and so forth. So that's basically the drums for the whole track. There isn't a whole ton of variety. As you can see, I chopped a couple of things here and there and reconsolidated them, but mostly that stays relatively consistent throughout the track. So on top of that is here are just like a couple of sidechain inputs that I did externally in this case, because the drums are so like messy and I wanted a really clean sidechain for all the other things. And yeah, then the next thing we have are, well, I guess it's the main arpeggio. Again, that's a Novo. So I'm going to play that for you. So this is the Novo string patch that I used and altered for that. Again, same idea. There's a little bit of like things going on the side, but mainly it just sounds like this. And then we have the two compressors here, which are side chaining. The utility, just to give it a little bit of width and panning. And then the decapitator again, which is kind of what gives it that nice rich sound. Yeah, it's so good what Decapitator does. Like some nice distortion slash saturation can make all the difference. And then there's just a little bit EQ here that cuts out the low end so that there's for the bass. And speaking of the bass, then the bass is like what starts together with that main arpeggio, and the bass is really just the same notes taken from this and then slightly altered, and obviously it's not as arpeggiated and more single tones. The bass, purely just the bass sample that came, that I zoomed in a lot into and just basically chopped up this one little sine wave and then used as the basis for the bass, I guess. So that on its own sounds like this. And so what I did in there is I altered the envelope a little bit. I filtered that like way down, tuned it, and gave it some glide so it could do these sort of 808 typey sounds. And then I filtered it some more. Then I made it mono, mostly like below 100 hertz. Again, some decapitator on top because I love decapitator. And what was kind of interesting is that clicky, loopy sound. I thought that was going to actually be a bother, but it turns out that when you filter that out, or when I took it out, the whole track kind of lacked the rhythm that gives it. It sounds a bit uncomfortable on its own, but It actually does give the track a lot in context, which I didn't expect, but turned out to be that way. So yeah, then there's a little bit of Pro-C on top. And you can hear that's basically what makes it so rich. And here I filtered a lot of the like harsher high frequencies of that click out, because otherwise it sounds like. And so I didn't want these clicks to be just quite as much poking through. And so they add kind of a nice little percussive thing in there. I know it's not clean, it's not by the book, but I like to do things a little off the beaten path. So I was good with that, and I really liked how it sounded. The next thing I brought in were the strings. Again, it's the same MIDI sample. So if anything, this track kind of goes to show how much you can make out of like one simple sort of arpeggiated chord progression MIDI track. And this is again another Novo surprise. I'll just play you a little bit relatively dry, so without this processing and the sidechain, and then it basically sounds like this. And then all I did to that to sort of mix it further in is I adjusted some of these parameters in the preset a little bit, changed some of the filter settings and twists, etc. Then I put some utility on it to make it really wide. Sidechained it to the drums. And filtered the low end out so that the low end is really only occupied by this bass line. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for those strings. And then the string lead that goes on top, that actually for me almost sounds more like horns, is this piece. Again, this is just a slightly altered MIDI version of this MIDI track here. As you can see, it's all from the what I assume is a Jupiter 8 patch. Again, it's a Novo. Like I said, pretty much everything in this track is coming from Novo with a couple of exceptions. And so this one sounds like this. And in context of the whole track, I feel like these strings do have sort of like a horn-like character. Becomes a little more apparent if I show you all the processing. So again, some width and a little gain reduction and a little panning from utility. Sidechained again to the drums. And then EQ'd the low end out. Yeah, so that's basically it. That's kind of the whole track. And I feel like in this mix, in this sample flip, it's not so much of a sample flip. I mostly just took something that was there, added a few little parts here and there, and sort of puzzled it together. But it also allowed me to put something like this out in like so few hours, which normally I can't do that quickly. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I really enjoyed exploring in this direction. Oh, let me just show you the master real quick. There's also not much going on this end. I basically have a little bit of low end focus going on. There's a very subtle equalizer here, a little bit of dynamic processing, very slight dynamic EQ, kind of some crafty imaging here, and then they're on top. So there isn't really a whole lot to do here, and a little bit of golf fuzz as well to kind of bring some of those nice frequencies back. Yeah, and that's it. That's what made this. Oh yeah, and one last thing I noticed, some of you might have spotted it, that we were clipping here a little bit. But I actually ended up leaving that in because I thought it did sound kind of good and appropriate for the track. Whatever works, I guess. So yeah, that was my slightly weird breakdown of this track and of my entry for the speed challenge. If you have any questions, feel free to like drop them below. If you have anything else you want to like let me know about this, feel free to leave a comment. Please leave a like if you enjoy these breakdowns, and I'll see you next time. And of course, as always, a huge thank you to the whole Snack Pack Bad Snacks Discord community for hosting these speed battles, to Dave for making these samples, and yeah, to everyone who contributed or gave me a tip along the lines on the server. And it's just the best place to be for me on the internet. I've never seen such a positive and supportive community. What can I say? I love you all, guys. Can't wait for the next battle, and I'll see you around. Take care. Bye.